Okay, we're going to look at some stuff with triangles. This unit's all about triangles and some new stuff, but this first idea is just kind of give you just a review idea with the Pythagorean theorem, but identifying sides. So we're going to start with sides. Everything that we do in this unit is dealing with right triangles. A right triangle is anything that has a 90-degree angle that's contained with it. Again, we are using, right triangles with this. So anything that has a 90-degree within that triangle, we're cognitive of and looking at with that. Okay. And so what I want to do is we can actually identify sides based on what angle I'm looking at. We're going to name them three different things. We're going to call it the opposite side, the adjacent side, and we're going to call it the hypotenuse, which you guys should be familiar with. Okay, so if I look at this triangle here on the left, I need to know what angle I'm dealing with, and this little symbol right here is going to be the angle that I'm dealing with. And then I've got three sides. I've got this 15, this 8, and this 17, and I want to name them. I always name the hypotenuse first. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. This is the long side. So over here is going to be my hypotenuse, this 17. Then I go and I say, okay, where's my angle? My angle's right here. And the side that is furthest away from that angle is what we call the opposite. That's why they call it the opposite side. So if I draw an arrow to the farthest away side, we're going to call this the opposite side. So 15 would be the opposite, which means there's only one side left, which is this 8. And that one's right next to my angle. So adjacent's another word for right next to. And so I need you to be able to identify sides first off. Okay. Understand we need to know an angle. This angle is what we call an angle of perspective. Okay, again, if I don't have that angle of perspective, then I can't name anything the opposite or the adjacent. And it does change. Like if this angle is over here on this side, then now all of a sudden 8 is opposite and 15 is adjacent. Hopefully you guys can see that. Look at this one on the right here. Again, I would identify my longest side. My longest side is the one away from the 90 degrees, so that's going to be this one. This 2 squared is 5 is my hypotenuse. There's my angle. I'm going to draw an angle to the farthest away, and that's going to be my opposite, which means 4 is my adjacent. This should be pretty quick that you guys can identify these as long as you understand those definitions. Okay? I put this bottom triangle because, guys, I don't have these symbols right here, so I've got to identify what my angle of perspective is. So let's say that my angle of perspective is A. If it's A, then I'm going to identify each of my sides, my opposite, my hypotenuse, and my adjacent side. Okay, if it's A, then my hypotenuse is still 13. That always stays the same. Again, if I'm here at A, what's the furthest away from A? That would be 5. So now my opposite is 5, which means my adjacent has to be 12. But look what happens if I change my angle of perspective to B. Now all of a sudden, again, my hypotenuse is still 13. That doesn't change anything. But what's my opposite now of B? Opposite of B, if I drew this arrow, would be 12. So now my opposite is 12. Which means my adjacent has to be 5 at that point in time. Okay? So you got to be able to identify sides. That's the first thing. Okay? Opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. That's all we're really looking for. If they give you the little symbol, then you go from there. If they tell you the angle, then you got to identify from there. Next thing I do need you guys to be able to understand is the triangle right or not. So we want to know, is this angle a right angle? And how we do that is we use Pythagorean theorem. You guys have seen Pythagorean theorem. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And what that means is c is always the long side. So that's always the hypotenuse, and a and b are the other two sides. It doesn't really matter which one's which in that case. Usually a is the shortest and b is the next one, but it doesn't matter because they're both on the same side. So to check and see if these triangles are right, this equation has to be true. And so if I was to do that on this one on the left, I'd say, okay, 5 is C, and then I've got A and B here. So all I'm going to do is substitute those numbers in and simplify. So this would be 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. And so I get what, 9 and 16 and 25 if I square all those. Add these two together, which gives me 25. And so I would say, yes, this is a right triangle, meaning that this angle right here is a right angle. If I looked at this one again, I did the same thing. There's A, there's B, because this has to be C. Again, it doesn't matter which one of those are. I'd go 6 squared plus 8 squared has to be equal to 9 squared. So this would be what, 36. This would be 64. And this would be 81. If I add those two together, that gives me 100, which equals 81. See how they're not equal? So this would be no, they are not right triangles. They have to be equal to each other for that to be the case because of this Pythagorean theorem or this rule that we have. Okay, so be able to use that Pythagorean theorem to tell whether or not a triangle is right or not, because this whole unit's about using right triangles. The last thing is I do want you to find a missing side using Pythagorean theorem. So I've got this 16 and this 20. The 20 is the C, that's the long side. This one's A or B, it doesn't really matter, but I am going to still use Pythagorean theorem to find this missing side. And you guys did this last year or the year before, but let's just remind you how to do this. Let's just say this is B and this is A. So I don't know A, so I know A squared plus 16 squared has to equal 20 squared. And I do know this is a right triangle because it already tells me this. So if I solve for A, that's going to be 20 squared minus 16 squared here. And so I'm just going to calculate that and get what I should get here. So I get what, 400, and then this is 256 is what I get from that. And so I have A squared. When I subtract these, I get 144 here. And then because of the squared, how we get rid of the squared is to use the square root. So I'm going to use the square root here. And that'll give me A here equals 12. And that'll be my missing side, just using that Pythagorean theorem that I have. So just a quick recap. Guys, I want you to be able to identify sides based on that angle of perspective. Again, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is always the long. It doesn't matter what the angle is, but the opposite and adjacent will change depending on where you're at. And then I do want you to be able to use Pythagorean theorem to state whether or not a triangle is right or not, or to find a missing side. So, all right, this has been your Math Moment with Mommy. Adios.